Right, just going to run through and show how I create this rose. So I don't think I can see comments or anything like that, but that's okay. I'll get it together. I'm really just having a dry run. I've got some leftover chocolate simmer from some projects that I was working on, and I just like making roses, so might as well. It's a public holiday here, so I figure have a bit of fun. It's also just nice to do a bit of a dry run through before next Saturday when I've got my Caking All Over the World figurine. So that is going to be this little creature here. So yeah, that's a really fast one to put together. I can show you the kind of practice ones, I think. Nah, it's all good. Let's see if I can get those in the shot, because I've sort of zoomed in a bit much. Oh, there they are. Yeah. Anyway, I'll move my rubbish out the way. So back to the rose. I'm just going to launch right into it. I've got modelling chocolate that I have covered with, coloured. I've coloured it with a bit of just dry colour, and I'm just keeping it nice and warm because it'll make it easier to roll it out. Now, let's see. Keep that moving. The first thing that I'm going to do, now I've got my chocolate warm and moving around, you can just buy that or make it yourself, either way. That's my homemade modelling chocolate, but start with the Kellogg's LCM. So this is just one of those Kellogg's Rice Krispie bars. And cut that in half. This one's got little unicorns on it, which is kind of fun. And just dust a bit of corn flour on your hand. And just for structural integrity, you want the little unicorns on the outside. And you want to crunch that in really, really tight, because you want that to have enough structural integrity to really hold onto the flour. And crunch that down to a really firm little ball. And here we go. Really firm little ball. And we'll just pinch one side of that into a very slight point. So very slight. So it's sort of like not quite an egg shape, just a little bit softer than that. So just a ball with a little bit of a bump on the end. And we'll grab see if I can zoom in a bit. No, won't let me zoom. Oh, it will, cool. Okay, so I'll grab this is just a lollipop stick and scalpel. And what I'm going to do is cut some little grooves on this so that the lollipop stick will actually grab hold of the LCM ball. And just keep that moving. There we go. Turn that over. So you want to cut down and towards yourself so that you create little shelves that they can sit on. So here we go. I'll just poke this in the bottom of that. And I'm using the wrong end. You only want to go about halfway in, and yeah, it's just a paper lollipop stick. I'll grab a little bit of this, warm it up nice. So warm it up really well, and poke that into the hole, cut the excess off. Use the blunt end just to force that in so that there's some chocolate for the stick to grab hold of. Push the stick in, and pat it down, and then make sure that the ball hasn't opened up any. And that's that. Now I'll just move this rose from here to here. Wow, there's an unpleasant close-up. Done. And we can come back a little bit so you can see just got a foam block. That's how that looks. And we can pick that up. So I'll come back. There we go. And stab that into the foam block and we're all good to go. Now that will set up over time. This is a really, really firm old piece of chocolate, so it'll set really, really, really hard very quick. when you're rolling up chocolate, you need to use way more corn flour than you'd use for any other medium. And just over the top, on the back, nice and good. And roll it out as big as you can. Now this stuff, when it's warm, rolls out quite easily, but as it cools down, it starts to crack, and it doesn't roll smoothly like you'd expect it to. Just wherever there's a bump, it'll spread. So if you've got a sheeter, you can use that. So here we go. Yeah, so for that central ball, it's just a Kellogg's LCM bar, and yeah, any Kellogg's Rice Krispie treat bar is good. If you get a few tears in this, it doesn't really matter. It just means you're not picking it up and turning it over enough. And I like to brush through things, so I'm going to get a few tears, it's fine. You want this to be a little bit thinner than a 5-cent coin. It's an Australian 5-cent coin. There we go. So that should, in theory, be enough for us to get all the bits out we need. I've just got a set of leaf cutters. I like the shape of these more. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-ish. Now the actual numbers here don't work, you just keep going until it looks right. And because this is chocolate, you don't actually need the really sharp cutting edge. I really like the shape of these, so I just use the wrong end of a leaf cutter, which is fine, it works. And move that out the way. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-ish, yep. Yeah, 10-ish will do. And then for the big one, I only really need 5 of these, but I'll do 6 just in case. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-ish, and 6-ish, yeah, that'll do. There we go, so we'll get all of that excess out of the way and munch it all up. One of the nice things about working with modelling chocolate is that it doesn't really dry out, especially if you're working with a good firm modelling chocolate like a Saraceno sculpting chocolate. So LCM bar is just the Australian branding for Kellogg's Rice Krispie treats. Yeah, we've got a pretty good selection of them over here. I use the bars just because I'm too lazy to make them myself. I don't want to deal with that kind of stickiness, or yeah, it's just way easier. So I'll grab one of these and a ball tool. Metal ball tool is your friend. And just going to run around the edge of these to thin the tops a little bit. Whoop. So I'm just flipping them on each side and thinning the tops. If you are not fast enough with this, your petals will set completely and they crack when you're working on them. So all you've got to do is just warm them up a little bit before you go. And it's a bit cold and rainy here, so mine are being a little bit unpredictable. If you've got really cold hands, you can find that you struggle with this a bit. And warm that up. When you're doing this, you're sort of cheating the edge. So you're working on quite a thick piece of chocolate, but you're making it look a lot thinner than it actually is. Come on, warm up. Just run around the edge. Now I'm starting on the mat and just nipping into the side to thin it off. And I don't want any real shape or interest in these, so here we go. That all comes at the end, and usually one of the biggest mistakes people make with roses is they give them too much frilliness. That's cool for some varieties, but most of them, like if you're going for a real classic rose, that's not really what you're after. And getting a nice thin edge on those, yep. Oh, hopefully I'm not off the screen. No, can't come back any further, that's fine. Here we go. So that's all my littlies. Then I move on to my mediums. And move on to my mediums. Sort of batch the processes a little bit. Warm them up a bit. Oh, yeah. No, I'm in Perth, not in Melbourne. Here we go. It just happens to be a really dreary day today. And we've got a public holiday, which is nice. This is what I'm choosing to do on my day off. So, I can sort of just see the edge of the comment through the camera holder, so warm them up. Come on, warm up nicely. It's nice to have a day off to play for once, because in retail it's been very busy. And everyone else has been in lockdown. We've still been working quite hard, most of us retail folk. That's all across the state, or all across the country. I'm sure it's the same in other countries at the moment as well. So warm those up. If you've got really cold hands, you might actually need a hot wheat bag or a hot water bottle off to one side, and that will help you to get these working in a way, like warm up your hands so that you can then warm up the chocolate, otherwise it just cracks like that. So that's where it was too cold and I pressed it a bit too hard. I can either try and bully this back into shape and just go with it, because it'll make an interesting petal on the outside, although I only really need 5, but that's why I always like to do a couple of extra. Come on, stop hurrying now. There. Okay, throw them all off to one side. The next thing that we do is kind of a bit fun. Let's come up a bit, see if you can see that. Whip. And yeah, move that out the way, move that out the way. Then this will become my little station where I put my stomped petals. Like that way so they sit nice. Now I've got a nice veiner here. It does the job. It's not amazing, but it's fine. And there we go. Just going to put that where you can see it, hopefully. Move that up there. So I sort of start further down. This veiner is not at all a rose veiner, but you don't really need one. I just happen to particularly like the pattern on this one. And I'm just veining them lightly. When I do this, I add more pressure at the top, and that helps to further thin the edges as well. While I'm doing this, just try and keep warming them up a little bit, because the temperature is plummeting while I'm doing this. And here we go. What I'm doing is putting them all up the same way, so the veins are all facing the same way. And if I do end up using this petal here, it'll be a nice torn one, so you just add a heap of brown and green around it and it makes it look like a really old petal. Generally speaking, like with most of the flowers, the petals on the outside tend to be the older petals that have been exposed to the elements more and like bug attack and stuff like that, so they can be a little bit more gnarly. Whereas the inner petals are usually very smooth and fresh still. Okay, so let's keep that going. And I'm just going to line these up with all the bum ends. This is the tedious part. There's nothing difficult about this flower. The placement takes maybe a little bit of time, and there's like literally thousands of different ways that you can do this. But here we go. This is where I start to get bored with them. Done. But if you're doing a bunch of these, the nice thing is that you can set them all up. I'll cut out 400 odd petals at once and just line them all up. So just have them all in groups of the same size and just run through the same process and just have it spread over the whole table. What brand of modelling chocolate do I use? For classes, when I'm running classes or when I'm doing demonstrations, I usually will use a brand called Chocolate. It's made in New Zealand and it's amazing. I also really like Saracino Pasta Scultura. It's their sculpting chocolate. It's really, really good for making all sorts of things with, because it's very firm and it sets up nicely. Now, with this one, it's my own personal chocolate that I make, which is 4.5 parts of melted white compound chocolate. I like to use the Calabo white compound chocolate. You can also use, well, really any white compound chocolate that's half decent. And 1 part corn syrup, so that's 4.5 parts white compound chocolate to 1 part corn syrup. And I tend to use a Korean corn syrup because it's got no vanilla flavouring in it, and I can use it for clients who might need to keep halal, etc. So yeah, it kind of comes up pretty good. And I do have a recipe on my website for modelling chocolate made with glucose instead of corn syrup if you can't find corn syrup where you are. It's pretty much the same, but you've got to add a bit more water to it just to thin it down and make it a little bit more flexible. So, getting there. Like I said, this is the boring bit. The other thing that I've been doing recently that I like to do, especially if I'm running a class and I need the students to have a little bit more flexibility, is I'll add 1/8 of the weight in white fondant, or just general fondant. And when you fold that through, it tends to give the chocolate just that little bit more flexibility. Even when it starts to set, it stays flexible for just a little bit longer, which is really handy when you're doing a class and you've got people in the class who've got cold hands and the petals start to crack when they're working on them. So yeah, it's a huge recipe, just the 2 ingredients, so 4.5 parts white compound chocolate to 1 part corn syrup. But it works. And I tend to cycle it through the freezer. You never want to blot off your excess oils or anything like that, because really what you're doing there is you're making sugar-based instead of modelling chocolate. What makes modelling chocolate so incredibly amazing is the fat. Like, you absolutely need to keep the fat inside the chocolate. So if it starts to separate, just throw it into a big Ziploc bag, press it all nice and flat, bung it in the fridge or freezer. And then once it's in there, let it set up nearly completely. and you just knead all the fat back through it. So any little lumps you just kind of pop with your fingers. You might need to cycle it through a couple of times, like with the microwave, just warm it up a little bit, knead it all through, put it back in the fridge, and just keep cycling it through till you've got a smooth, usable product. But you can see it sets up really, really hard while that's sitting there. This is like dry and crumbly and firm. That's just because it's cold. You just need to warm it up again and get it going. And that's all good. Okay, so that's all of those veined. All veined nicely, all facing the same way. Then I get to bring in the colouring. Let's see, where's my colouring? So nice big brush, lots of colour. Let's try not to get this on my t-shirt. And headbutt the camera. Now this is how I get a really dark, true red. You start with a magenta colour, which is like a hot pink, or I think in this brand it's called rose. And mix in a little bit of yellow with it. So now what I'm doing here, and I'm overloading these, but when you drag the colour on, you should go across the petals. So really, really low across the petals just to highlight those veins. And the reason that we want to do that is we end up banging out most of the actual surface detail, so you kind of want to have it highlighted in the colour before you do. That's with the next step. So this is quite a weird way of doing roses because they're all very, very, very flat and very kind of unremarkable for the longest of time. You don't really give them any shape until you're assembling them practically. So here we go. There we are. And yeah, just the richness of the pink here helps to really create some colour. I'll just grab some of this yellow, mix it in with the pink. And that doesn't look that great now, but it will later on. Especially on those big outer ones. So what I'm doing is painting the outside of the petals at the moment, just with a Petal Dust. I've been buying these in bulk from Bake Boss, which is great. I work for Bake Boss, so quite handy. I've found that I can make my own colours with these really big bulk packets. So yeah, a little bit of blue, a little bit of the sharp yellow. You get this incredible moss green colour. And just mix it through. You cut it down with a little bit of corn flour and it makes it a softer colour so that it's not as intensely bright and neon, which is what I've done with the yellow. That's why the yellow is not creating as sharp a red as it normally would. But that's all good. Now, these are the outer leaves, so I'm going to use just a little bit of green on these, and you just take the excess off the brush. And I don't need the green all the way over it, I just need it on the bottom of the outside petals. And I tend to get a bit carried away with this and throw it everywhere. So the main reason that I set the petals up this way with the bum ends together and the top ends together is as I'm painting, I don't end up getting too much of a muddy colour across them. And I actually really don't mind the muddy colour, but it just helps to keep the green separated from the other colours. So when you're doing a really light coloured flower, that's really handy. It means you can have a bit of a colour gradient going across each petal. And just turn these all over. The paintbrush is a surprisingly good tool for picking these up and turning them over and not getting yourself covered in colours. Done. And these are very cold and very firm now. But that's alright. And going to mash in as much of this colour as I can. You'll notice that I'm not really giving it that much love and care because you really don't need to. You're just throwing some colour on it. And I'm starting to get that on my t-shirt, which is not great. So Yeah, I reckon that's nearly enough of that. It's only so that it's got a bit of interest on it anyway. Can't see the insides as much, so that's fine. I'll just mash some colour onto these little ones. Yeah, and that'll do, because otherwise I'll be doing that for far too long. I get a bit carried away. So put all your petals together, stack them all up nicely, all in their little sizes. Oh, come on, get off the paper. Yep. And that doesn't look like much yet, but it will. I'll take some of that colour away. And oh, here's my little thingy. So here. So hopefully you can see that. Yep. Now the next bit is continuing to thin and shape the petals and pound the colour in. So we start with it upside down. You turn it back the right way, warm it up a little bit, and you can do a few of these at a time. So if you work in groups, it tends to help this a little. And across there. So I'm doing these with the vein side. Oh, let's see if I can get this close enough to you to see. Will it refocus? Yep. Maybe. So I'm doing this with the vein side facing up. Well, how can I explain it? The mountains are facing down originally. Then when you turn it over, you've got the little mountains facing up and the valleys facing down. And that just helps to give you a more natural petal shape where the petals will curve naturally away from the center of the flower. Turn all these over, and these are really set now. But that's okay, I can just warm them up a little bit more. Run around the edges. Warm, warm, warm. Move those ones off. And more of these. Probably won't use all of these. Like I said, the numbers don't really matter with these at all. It's more just a case of getting the shapes correct. Come on, warm up nicely. And run around the edges. So what happens when I do this is the colour actually gets pounded into the petal. So all those veins, even though they get flattened, you can still see them because of the, let's see if that'll refocus. Not even slightly. Try that, maybe, yeah. But because of the colouring and the veining, they all kind of sit nicely and behave nicely. Let's see if I can correct the angle on this for you. Here we go, this is a better way of doing it. Yeah. Now, the more fun thing, and a little bit of water. And I can see if I can keep trying to knock things off while I work. I'll start with the flatter ones first, and you just want to paint the, start with the flatter ones first, and you just want to paint the insides. Woo, way too much water. Take the excess off, turn it over, paint the insides a little bit. Yep, paint the insides a little bit. And just remember to take the excess off, paint the insides. What this will do is it'll start to melt the sugar in the modelling chocolate. So although the fat rejects the water, the sugar does eventually melt, and that creates a sticky surface. There we go. That should help. Now, when we're putting these on, the first couple of petals, they go on really, really low. And we're just basically covering up the ball. So you can see it sits really low from directly above. And then you tuck the bum end in and just pat that down. So second pedal, put that on. Sorry about the squeaking. And I'm warming this up as I go. And lay that over, press it down, and then you can see all that stuff at the end doesn't really matter. So you just pat it down, spread it in, all good. So then another one, keep it nice and warm or it will crack. And I'm just going to go straight opposite this. You can interleave these if you want. Now you can see what I've just done there is I've pushed them towards each other so that you get a bit of a column of air behind the actual petal itself. Then I attach it down the sides and blend the bum end in. And at no point am I holding it by the ball here because it will just melt. So I've got really toasty hands. If I just keep holding on to the central ball thing here, it will all go horribly wrong. So just bring that around there. Now you can see as I'm doing this, I'm kind of working in an M shape. So from the very central petal, each petal I add is ever so slightly higher while they're still pointing inwards. So they're all ever so slightly higher. It's really subtle. But as soon as you start to come down, it'll either start to look like a pine cone or the petals have to start to open out a bit more. So you can see I'm just shaping the petals a little bit as I'm applying them. And these first few go on really, really tight. And I'm trying to keep them in groups of 3-ish, just while I'm putting them on. And pat that down. Again, you can interleave these if you really care. You don't need to, and by interleave them, I mean that's where you put the last petal down and pick up the one that you've put down just before it. So warm that one up. Come on, warm it up, warm it up. Ooh, just smashed a petal. Funny. So, take the excess off. A little bit of water, and let's just replace that. There, that looks good. Now, what I was talking about before interleaving the petals, now this is a kind of dumb level of detail to go to. You really don't have to, but if you just pick up the last one that was put down in the set of 3, you can just smush in another petal under it. That's fine. And then I'll move up a layer because I don't need to do much more, but before I do, it's going to blend in the bottoms of these so that it creates a really firm surface to work on. And then move that over there, take some of that rubbish away, and I'll start shaping these in a group of 2, group of 3 I think, and then another group of 3, yep. Group of 3, then a group of 5 I'd say. Yeah, that works. So where are we? That doesn't really matter. Yep, so warm those 3 up. These are my mediums. Nice and warm. Run around the edge, run around the edge. These ones are already pretty thin. I don't need to thin them back the other way. Probably should, I'm just being lazy. Oh. That's just corn flour in the chunks cloth. Done, turn those over. You can give these a little bit of shape just by running from the top to the bottom, top to bottom, top to the bottom. It's not much, but if you make the petal look more like a real petal before applying it, it just helps to really sell the visuals on it. So, there we go. A little bit there and there. Now, when I add the water and I've put too much on, I take the excess off and I leave it for a second, because if you've got too much water on this, it just slides around and it becomes a bit pointless. Okay, that's too much, so I've taken the excess off there again. Now, stick that one on, and one. Oh. Paying attention to this side here more so that I can blend that in. I'll leave the other side up just in case I want to be ridiculous and fold the other one under it, but also you can fold it out. Now you never want the tops of the petals to just come straight out. You always want them to always be heading back towards the middle of the flower where you can. And move that around a bit more. Here we go. Squidge that on, and again I'm pressing from either side here. I'm not flattening in the center so that you can see there's a column of air down the back of it. And then I'll just run down the sides and tuck in the bottom so that it protects that little column of air down there. And just give that a little bit of a shaping, not too much, because again we don't want too much shape in it yet. And this one, just fold that back a little bit, and I'll show you with the next set what I mean by the shaping of these. But sort of just folds back from that central point. I'll go into more detail in a sec and slap that one on there. And they don't have to fully meet up either. It's fine if they don't. Done. What's more important is just trying to maintain that little gap of air behind each petal. It makes it look a little bit more natural. And I'll put that down, because if I keep holding on to that, it will just melt into my hands, and all that central core becomes all sticky and gross. It just comes off the stick. So then, let's start with them up the other way. And most people don't realise you just use hot soapy water with these and leave them out to dry for a day or two. And they all dry up nicely. Got a little bit of water on this and it's made the bolt all sticky. So it's not as effective, but that's all right. Just need to clean it off and it'll be fine. Run around here. And turn them all over. Then running them back the other way. Oh, come on. So what I'm doing here is just cleaning it off with a little bit of paper towel to stop that stickiness. Yep, so run them back the other way. And this will help to give them a nicer shape. Turn them all over again. And do the thing where you're not quite from the very top, but about 2/3 of the way up down to the bottom, and 2/3 of the way up down to the bottom, 2/3 of the way up down to the bottom, and it just creates that little ball shape that's quite pleasant in the petals. Now if we pick up a petal and we imagine that this is the central point at the top, we want to fold it back, almost like you're making a paper airplane, the very beginning of that, so that the tip of the petal, the very top, still points back towards the center of the flower. Then you've just got these two little wings coming back on each angle very slightly. And you'd probably make the outside edge, like the edge that's folding away from the flower, more pronounced. And you just do that on all of them a little bit. And what I'm doing here as well is I'm shaping them, but leaving them on the table so that they set up. I'm not ever going to be shaping a petal and applying it straight away to the flower. I probably could at the moment because it's so cold in here, but if I do that too quickly, you're just adding kind of an overly warm, floppy petal to the central spike there, and it makes it, means you've got no structural integrity. Whereas once you've shaped these and you don't hold them in your hand for too long while you're doing this, it means that they've got time to actually set up so that when you're applying them, you're working with something a lot firmer. That works a lot better. And pick that up and just lay that over there. Now these are starting to come lower, so you can see as I've been going, each of the petals has been ever so slightly higher than the row before it. When you start to open the flower out, that's when you do it the same height, or even ever so slightly lower, and then you start coming down from there. Again, every rose is different, so it really doesn't matter. You can do what you want, but it just tends to help a little bit. I'm going to open these out quite a lot. Oh, and I've torn that petal. That's okay. Just colour that with a little bit of brown and make it look like it's an older damaged petal, like it's had a bit of an insect attack. And I can pick that one up on the outside ones. It makes more sense to pop that one in there. And again, secure it really well to the petals behind it. Don't slam that core of air shut behind you. Keep that open, press it all down, and this is where you've got to work really fast to get the shape that you actually want before you put it down, because if you keep holding on to that, it will just melt. So that works, and these ones, let's start with the biggies, or finish with the biggies. And where are we? Can't see some of these so clearly, what way up they are. So I'll start with them all with the little valleys facing up. Run around those. And these were quite thin petals, so they're staying a little bit more flexible, which is sort of nice. On the outer ones, again, it doesn't matter if they get quite banged up. Done. But yeah, these do crack really, really badly if your petals are too cold when you're doing this. So done. And run around that one, turn it over, run back the other way. This is my messy petal, but I kind of like it. Might use it. Round that way back. And again, warm up that section where you're about to move it. Run from 2/3 of the way up, down to the bottom. Gives it that nice cup shape. Do that little wing thing again. Oh, I'm off the screen. Try that here. So I've got these 2/3 of the way up, down to the bottom. Fold it back. Warm it up a bit. Warm it up a bit, warm it up a bit. I can see this one here is a little bit cracked around here, but if you just keep the warmth in it, it all comes together nicely. Top to the bottom, fold them back. Give it a bit of interest. Make it look like it's a bit loved. Done. And top to bottom. Top to bottom. And lastly, there, that'll do. Now if I keep holding that because it's so thin, it's just going to turn to mush. So leave that well enough alone and we'll move on to applying these. Now you can see I've mostly covered the bottom. I'll almost completely cover the bottom with these last ones and they're going to be open really wide, which is why these need a bit of time to set up on the bench. So I'm not going to be touching them too much other than to get just a little bit of the water on, take the excess off. And unfortunately the bit that you're looking at is blurry because I've got this facing the wrong thing. Maybe move that out the way, it'll sharpen it up. Take the excess off, bit of water. Take the excess off. You can sort of hear when they're set up, they make a more plasticky noise when they hit the bench. So it's kind of fun. All right, so I've got my waters on there, not too much. I don't think I will use the manky one, it's fine. It's all right, it tried. And for this, put that on here, sort of line it up with that, and get the bum end correct. This is the only time that you really worry about the bum end of the petals. Oh, and yeah, that's right, pressing that side in first. So the side that's closest to me gets pressed in first. And blend that on a little bit. Next one, stick that on there. Get the positioning right, blend that on. Now if I take too long with this, the petals below it will end up melted and the shape won't be good. So let's give that a bit more. Okay, and this is one of those things where the outer edge needs a bit more shape than the inner edge. So there we go, press that on. And if you add too much water, this does get really soggy. Nearly done. So what I'm doing when I'm doing this is I'm pressing all along the edges from about 2/3 of the way up down to the tip, so that that gets pressed on nicely. I can peel that one back if I want. Drop that in there nice. Yep, move it over a bit and squidge these over, press it all down, and yep, get it to all behave a bit. And make sure you can't see anything that you shouldn't be able to see down the bottom of it. You can just reshape the petals a bit so that the inner edge is tighter and the outer edge is looser. And that just helps it to look a bit more natural. Done. Okay, so there's that bit done. Now if I leave that alone, that will firm up really nicely. So again, I've not put any up or down pressure on that because otherwise it will make it spiral out of control. Here's a thin sheet of stuff that I've rolled out earlier. Nope, I've got pink all over it. I'm just going to cut out a really quick basic calyx. So, here we go. Will do. So, not worrying too much about the calyx. I probably should, but it doesn't really matter that much. Put that off to one side, and I will give this a little bit of colour. A bit more colour. So just across the edges, a bit more of that sharp pink. A little bit more of the yellow in with the pink. And it just helps to finish it off, make it look a bit more loved. It's got the actual colour in the veins itself that's been pounded into the rose really well. You can turn it over and give it more colour on the bottom, but the nice thing about having put the green on the bottom there is it's sort of sorted that out for you. Grab this thing and just going to give it a light coat on one side with some green. Oh, this looks a mess, it's fine. So that'll be the inside, and then the other side gets a really heavy coat. Now what's important with this is you don't want too much water in it at all, because the petals get really, really soggy, like that central section gets really soggy and everything just droops. So I get lots of nice colour on that. Turn it back over to the lighter side, and a little bit of water. Take your excess off, paint that down, paint it on nicely, drop this through. Whoop. Come on, work with me. And just very, very carefully press that into place. Of course, you can give the calyx more interest and make it look better. It's fine. Getting there. Done. So that's your calyx on. Then a little bit more here. So just another little blob. And that's picking up all the brown, but that's all right, it'll make it interesting. Stick that onto the stick at the bottom. And this becomes our little rose hip. So a little bit more warmth works well. Cornflower on your fingers. And bring that down. Bring that down. And you can spend more time shaping that into a more realistic rose hip if you really want. A bit more of this. I kind of like having a bit of the reds in the green. It just makes it look more natural to me. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I like it. Done. And then the really cool thing is the final step. So final step, we'll move that colour out of the way. And that is to blowtorch it. Now, what the blowtorching does is it just locks all the colour in. So you just very lightly run across each petal. And it's just nice and quick, nice and light. And not too much. You don't want to go too far with it because it will actually melt your petals. But if you're nice and quick, it just melts the surface of the petal and doesn't undermine the actual integrity of the petal itself. And that is that all done. So a nice, bright, happy little rose. You can add a little bit more colour on that section there. Where it was cracked, I'm just going to add a little bit of the green. And it just makes it look like it's, I don't know, seen some damage. There. And you can do the same on some of the outer petals. And that is my deep red rose, all done. You could use some aubergine on it as well, some other colours if you really want. But that's a completely edible rose on a lollipop stick, all done and dusted. So, yeah, be sure to tune in on Saturday, the 3rd of October at 9, It's at 9 a.m. UK time to see a really fast demo of how to make I'll keep those there, might as well. How to make a modelling chocolate witch. So it's how to make a structured figurine using modelling chocolate and moulds to get a really good, super fast result. So this is, 45 minutes worth of work for a really fast little witch figurine. So yeah, that's cakeflixofficial.com. Facebook.com/cakeflixofficial, FLIX, cakeflix, for that demo. And there's 12 other demonstrators as well. So it's 12 hours of free demonstrations of this quality, generally a lot more thought out and a lot faster. But yeah, it's a good day. I've really enjoyed it the last couple of times Paul and David have put it on. So looking forward to presenting then. If anyone's got questions, just ask them at the end when I post the video. And yeah, look after yourselves, stay well, and give modelling chocolate a try. It's a lot of fun. Cheers.